Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I have a really exciting video for you today. I have a special guest, Jason Perez, who is my BFF from Every Night is Game Night, and this is his first time on my channel. Hey Jason!
Yo, my peoples, what's up? How you doing, guys?
Hopefully everybody is good tonight, because Jason and I have something really special for you. We are going to have our very first video on this channel about board gaming, history, and how the theme of a board game and actual historical events can work together to enhance gameplay.
Yes, so Liz and I are overeducated. We can probably go there. We have lots of letters after our name. It is not something that we advertise a whole lot, but when we talk games, Liz and I, when we talk games amongst ourselves, we really get into this stuff, especially if the game has a historical context. We just want to know. Like this particular game that we picked, Lisboa. Liz, what'd you do? Go get a book or something like that?
I did. Okay, so we're going to talk about Lisboa tonight, which is apt because the quake that destroyed Lisbon actually took place on November 1st, 1755. So we are right around that anniversary. And yeah, Lisboa was inspired by attempts to rebuild the city after the earthquake. And I had no idea there was a destructive earthquake in Lisbon. I had no clue. So I went and got a book. It's called This Gulf of Fire. I'll be real, the book is pretty dry, but I learned a lot about European history that I had no idea. I thought I knew things about European history, but clearly I didn't, because I had no idea about any of this stuff until I actually looked into it. And Lisboa is a good game, but I also am excited that it inspired me to look this stuff up.
And we're going to be real with you guys here listening. This video might be a little bit more dry than your usual game coverage. No gameplay. We're not going to be talking about that. We're just going to be talking about historical background because we love it.
Well, you don't
and not only do we love it, it's clear that some of these designers love it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
that's why there's two of us. We wanted the back and forth. This is much better than just like wah 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 history wah wah.
What? Nobody wants to listen to just history forever? Come on. But one thing that's so charming about learning to play Lisboa, to me, is that in the rulebook, there's all these little asides from Vital Lacerda where he's clearly excited and he wants to give you these little notes about all the little cultural things and the reasons why the mechanics are the way they are, and these little historical background pieces. And I found that so charming, and it actually really made the game easier for me to learn, actually.
Yes.
And it made it a lot more fun to play because it made more sense.
And that's why we're going to do these history chats. We hope that this is the first of a couple that we do. And the whole goal of it is to give a hopefully entertaining access point for you guys to talk about some of the history stuff and some of these games so that you get into it more. We love thematic gaming, and history-themed games are thematic games if you know the history. You can kind of see yourself on some level diving into the world of what the game is presenting to you. And Vital Lacerda he really did soak a lot into this, as the rulebook indicated. Right. So good.
Oh, I'm just going to rat you out. So Jason wouldn't touch Lisboa with a 10-foot pole.
The actual game itself? Okay, no. Incorrect. That is incorrect. No. It is not a game I'm going to seek out. I am not a Euro player. However, if you were to present it to me and teach me and guide me through a game, I would not run away screaming. No.
All right, PAX Unplugged, we're on.
There you go. Well, we have plenty else to play. So.
Excuses, they're already happening.
Plenty else to play. You have to chisel for me. If you don't know what a chisel is, that's another video.
Yes, go play detective, kids.
All right, so let us get to History Chat Lisboa. So I have not played the game, Liz has, so I'm going to contribute some historical background, some stuff that was happening in the 18th century in the world. The earthquake happened in 1755, and it was like any period of history, there's a lot going on, and we'll break some of that down for you. And then Liz is going to jump in with some of the actual ways in which the history is baked into the game. So let's get some background out of the way. The 18th century, the 1700s, was a time, historians like to call it the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment was a time of transition in the European world. Beforehand, you had kings, nobles, priests, of Christianity, Christendom. The kingdom of Christianity was ascendant in Europe, and it was on this kind of slow decline for a couple of centuries. We're already past the Renaissance. We're already past some of the more humanistic endeavors. We had Isaac Newton and Galileo in the previous century kind of discovering and lauding secular science as opposed to just listening to theologians. So slowly, you have this kind of dissolution of the old order. And then the Enlightenment comes in and says, here's a whole new order. And it's going to play in Lisboa because literally what you're doing is you're building a whole new order. We're going to get to that in a second. So that's the first thing that's going on. The second thing that's going on, not only kind of culturally and intellectually, but also geopolitically. This is the kind of age of discovery and conquest. So discovery happened in the kind of the 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. In the 15th, 16th centuries, colonization happened. They went to the Americas and Africa. This is the time where it kind of kicks into overdrive because of increases in technology. Ships are getting better, navigation is getting better, and all the great powers are going to the ends of the earth, trying to grab land, because that is where a lot of the wealth of these places came from. What's Portugal doing? They're doing stuff. And in the previous century, they actually had a lot of land. They had land in Africa. They had land in Brazil, which continues to be kind of a Portuguese thing. It's the main language in Brazil. And also had land in Goa. So I emphasize Goa because you can actually play the game Goa. And a lot of these games you can play. Funny enough, there are other games that are set in Portugal. Did we research those, or did we forget that?
Research.
Oops.
I do know that.
That's the whole point.
I researched an earthquake. So I know that Coimbra is a location in Portugal. I don't know if that has to do with the game, but I'm pretty sure it does. So it has to do with Portugal. It's an assumption.
Goa in particular has to do with colonization, and it is a very old style Euro, simple, auction based and everything. But you are spreading influence around this land, which you can't even tell it's Goa. It could be anywhere, but I don't know. The designer was interested in Goa. Lisboa, however, takes a whole different track, and we'll have a lot more to say about that. But if you wanted to play an all Portugal game night for whatever reason, you could play Goa, but then Lisboa. Sure. All right.
Hey, they even rhyme.
So that is yeah, there you go. I'm looking at it right next to each other in the notes, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. We are such dorks. This is terrible.
It's not terrible. Right. It's amazing.
So by 1755, though, Portugal is kind of on the decline. So they had a lot of land, but they kind of got defeated in a couple of naval battles and kind of overseas battles by the Dutch and by the English, and eventually by Spain. Spain and Portugal usually kind of aligned, especially in the previous century, but they're kind of in descent. So Lisboa, they're kind of in this in-between space. So that on one hand, they're kind of declining and they're kind of holding on. And a lot of their wealth is based on what's coming from Brazil. Like there's not too much going on in terms of like the actual continent itself. However, they are trying to load up to kind of restore glory. And they were building stuff. So it's not like, it was a dormant city or like declining. Like they were trying to build stuff, including.
Are we talking about the Opera House?
Yeah, the opera. You love that Opera House.
I do. I love the opera. I used to go to cheap operas when I was in college. That was like
one of my... You did not. That's a lie.
It was so good.
No one goes to cheap opera. Get out of here.
Yeah, I went to Chicago and they have these like cheap opera tickets, like $20 to go to the opera. And I got to get seats sometimes. It was awesome.
Wow. I saw Starship Troopers a bunch of times in college.
So, Portugal was actually this like serious hub for culture, and that's something I actually didn't know until I started looking into this topic. I think it wasn't very long before the earthquake. There's the opening of this huge opera house with like stars from all over Europe who come to sing. The royal family had this incredible archival collection with, paintings by European masters and like interesting documents on a wide array of topics. And, this is a very learned, art-centered country where a whole lot of really interesting stuff is happening artistically. And, it's actually really surprising because, Portugal is like the country you don't talk about in AP Euro. You know what I mean? It's a more neglected place.
So, how did Portugal fall off the map so fast? So they're in decline-ish, but they're kind of still a cultural powerhouse. And they're still kind of like have designs on getting back in the colonial game in a big way. And then the earthquake happens. So we are going to November 1st, 1775. No, sorry.
1755.
Yes, November 1st, 1755. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
And November 1st is a notable holiday in the Catholic calendar, which is.
All Saints Day.
You got it right.
So, just for context, typically I do not care about saints that weren't in Egypt before, like, the 6th century. Like, that's my wheelhouse. So
Yeah. Liz is an ancient history scholar. We're talking about, way in the medieval age and beyond. So I'm surprised that Liz knew All Saints Day, but yes, All Saints Day was a very, very big Catholic holiday at the time. So
yes.
the city literally was lit up with candles and votive services. I mean, it was a very solemn religious time.
Yes.
So then an earthquake happens, and they didn't have seismology back then, but it was about a 9 magnitude earthquake on a scale of 10. So it was like a devastating earthquake. Started in the Atlantic Ocean and spread into Lisboa, which is a coastal city. So you had the earthquake, which was bad enough. And
right.
so then once you kind of go through the shocks of the earthquake, and then there's aftershocks and that kind of thing. And it was actually, the earthquake is so big, it was felt in like Finland. Like there were places all over Europe that felt this earthquake, but it just kind of got to Lisboa and like it was right in the path.
Also, interestingly, there were aftershocks all over the place for a long time after this earthquake too. It wasn't just a one-time thing.
Right, but this was the devastation. Like this was like the thing that happened. So then you have the earthquake, and then if you have an earthquake under an ocean, you get a typhoon. Or tsunami. Sorry about that. You get a tsunami, and then the tsunami hits Lisboa. And then, not only do you get the tsunami hitting Lisboa in the face, you also get fires. And where did the fires come from? Oh my God, there was the middle of a religious holiday.
Well,
which
when
is
you're
crazy.
Passionate about religion, no, okay. So what happens is every candle in every church in town is lit, and then all the fires in everybody's houses are lit because they're going to go home and cook after they go to church. So Lisbon collapses on top of a lot of fire. And it's a lot of flammable material. They don't have fire codes in this time. So everything just up in flames for days.
Yeah, to give you context in terms of numbers, the population at the time was about 270,000, which is a pretty decent-sized city, even at that time. 90,000 of those around then died, which is a 33% fatality rate, which is a shocking number of people. 85% of the buildings were completely destroyed, including the Opera House that be still Liz's heart. The Opera House did not make it.
Heartbreaker.
The Royal Palace, the Royal Library, archives, the largest public hospital in the known world at the time also collapsed. I mean, it was just utter devastation. Everything. So many cultural things and so many infrastructure things were completely destroyed. Then what? So I mean, literally, Portugal. I mean, Portugal is shaken. Lisboa is a complete and utter disaster. And then you get to like why, and that was a question that time period asked. Like we might not ask the question of why in our era because we're secular, but at the time it was still a very devout culture. So they asked why. Why would God allow this to happen? And we were talking about this before the call. Like, there's actually 2 different strains of ways of answering that question, right?
Yeah. So, like, there's the idea that, Lisbon was a sinful town and they got what they deserved because it was a divine punishment. And then, there are people who kind of question whether God could be responsible for such a thing if he's really all good and all powerful and all loving of humanity. So like Voltaire actually ends up using the quake in Lisbon as an argument against the involvement of a loving God in the lives of humans.
Can you believe that? Using an earthquake to disprove God. This is the age we're living in. It's like, look, an innocent old city, and look what God allowed to it. There must be no God. It's the Enlightenment. And so that really.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is that the role of the church in this is a little bit interesting too, because on the one hand, you have, actually, I think Portugal had a huge number of clergy in the country, so there's a whole lot of religious people on scene. You have people who are helping people who are disaffected. You are, and kicked out of their homes. You have heroic stories of people saving the weeping statue of the Virgin Mary from a church. And interestingly, the church was actually responsible for collecting a lot of the data about seismology that eventually led to more scientific conclusions. They sent out a survey about like, oh, when did you begin to experience tremors? When did, it's sort of interesting. Like there's a lot of nuance to everybody's involvement, but yeah, in some ways it does kind of shake out to Enlightenment thinkers kind of taking advantage of the situation to push against church norms and leaders.
Right. And it's not just the Enlightenment thinkers pushing against the church. It is Enlightenment politicians and Enlightenment people who are interested in remaking actual societies pushing against the royalty. So Portugal has a king and did have residents in Lisboa. He Don Jose, right?
Yeah.
King Joseph I in English. He was actually in the royal palace and had to be spirited away, and like had some kind of PTSD reaction to it, where moving forward they didn't actually rebuild the royal palace in his lifetime. He just lived in a tent on a hillside, which is not exactly the mark of personal strength. So that gives you everything you need to know about that this was not the man to lead Lisboa back to prominence. He kind of outsourced that. So in a very real way, yeah, right, outsourced. Sorry about that. I'm using modern terminology, but he did. Like, here, you do that. So in a very real way, the royalty is failing the people. The religion is failing the people. Who steps up to actually get things going?
Well, in fairness, it was a really nice tent. It's made of wood. Very fancy. But what's really interesting, is that, Dom Jose doesn't want to take full responsibility for dealing with this by himself. So he ends up signing over a huge amount of power to the Marquis de Pombal. So Pombal is this guy who had been ambitious for a long time and kind of thwarted by other people in the establishment. He wasn't quite as blue-blooded as everybody else, but he was capable. And so what happens is he gets this huge amount of responsibility, and you give him an inch, he takes like 50 miles. He's ready. So he's in there saying he speaks for the king, and then you end up with all these commands that, like, do they come from Jose? Did Pombal make them up? And before you know it, he's executing people who commit thievery after the earthquake with probably no trial at all. But he's also, taking a lot of control over disaster relief and how we're going to rebuild the city and helping people, get things together outside of the city. And it's a really interesting thing because he's a very controversial figure actually outside of, in Lisboa, you're going to see him as a hero. There's like 3 people that you can do actions with. There's the king himself, there's Pombal, and then there's Manuel de Maia, who was actually very old at this time, but he's the chief architect in Lisbon. So what you have is, in the game of Lisboa, you're achieving actions by visiting or trading with those 3 noble people. So it looks like a unified rebuilding effort from people in Lisbon. The reality is a lot more nuanced, but how do you get that into a board game? But
right.
Yeah.
The idea being that the Marquis de Pombal is the guy,
Yeah.
That is the head of the kind of mind that is reconstructing Lisboa. And it's weird because he's an autocrat. He doesn't believe in the will of the people. And, it's kind of, he ruled with an iron fist and everything. So how can we call him an Enlightenment figure? However, he kind of represents an Enlightenment ideal that anybody from any class can upjump and rule, because he's not from the noble stock and he's not from, the usual channels of power, which in itself is an Enlightenment ideal. So it's probably accurate to say that the Marquis represents Enlightenment ideal more than actually ruling as an Enlightenment figure. That is hair splitting. We are getting nerd chatty all over the place, but whatever. 72 views, people.
I have no shame about my nerdiness.
No shame. No, it's really important to note because, like I said, I haven't played the game, but it's when you actually build the city of Lisboa in the game, from my understanding, so much of this history is kind of soaked in without even knowing so. So like we talked about, as an example, there are like 3 different disasters hit. It wasn't just one disaster, it was 3.
Yeah.
And you can actually, like, those 3 remnants of those 3 disasters are actually in the game, right?
Yeah. So one of the main thing that you're going to be doing with your interactions with the noble people that I've just mentioned, so the architect, the Marquis, and the king, is you're going to be rebuilding. And one thing that's really cool is that the game really represents the effort to redo how the city was done. So European cities are messy. They get very labyrinthine
Oh
maze-like.
my, yeah. Yeah, go ahead and drive in like Naples. Go.
It's what smart cars are for.
I mean, well, it's you can't even. It's not even that because they're so small. Well, that's the thing. Like they're small and twisty, and they make very very little sense. And Lisboa was rebuilt to make sense
Right.
to a mercantile atmosphere. So, I mean, this is an apocryphal thing, but the Marquis de Pombal was once asked, why are these streets so big and so orderly? And he's like, far-sighting into the future going, soon they will not be big. It's like, okay. And now here we are. And he's like, it's almost like he foresaw automobile travel or anything like that. Again, apocryphal, but that kind of thing, like, because people were looking forward and we're like, we're not going to get better with waiting for the king or waiting for God to do this. We're going to get better by, unleashing people's, creativity, unleashing people's, the commerce and the entrepreneurial sense, unleashing people's entrepreneurial sense and making that happen. So the city was also built with that in mind as well, right?
Yeah. So in the game, as in life, there's the new city you're rebuilding is very organized. So you can only build certain types of shops on certain types of streets. And there are limitations to where you can build. But the other thing that's interesting is that as you build, you're clearing out rubble, and there's actually 3 different cube colors to represent the 3 different types of damage to the city. So there are blue cubes for the tsunami damage, they're red for the fire, and kind of a clay color for the earthquake. And one of the game's potential end conditions is if somebody collects enough sets of those representing enough rubble cleanup in the city.
Right.
So yeah, I mean it's actually really really cool. The one thing that I actually think is a big deal in Lisbon that doesn't show up in the game, other than like international politics, but I mean it's already a really heavy game. What are you gonna do? Is like the church has such a small role in it. There's like a cardinal track where you move the cardinal around, you get some bonuses, you can trade those bonuses in for points. And that's pretty much it. And it would have been interesting to see a little bit more of the church in there just because Pombal hated the church. Like he, well, I mean, he was a Christian man. It's not he hated all the, but
he hated the clergy. He hated the people that were grubbing for power. Because at this time, Christendom, the kingdom of Christianity, was still ascendant. I mean, and you still had all the big clerical power players getting their grubby hands into power. And I think, if I remember correctly from my reading, they were in with the queen at the time. So, and favored. And particularly in order of clergy called the Jesuits. So the Jesuits are a religious order. They take vows. And they were kind of the church shock troops that were founded after the Reformation to kind of like, okay, here's Christianity. We're going to, in a lot of ways, they were kind of more Catholic than the Pope, which was a little bit weird. But yeah, very, very hardcore Christians, spreading out the intellectual this, spreading out this. And this is going directly against what Pombal is trying to do, which is secularize the place and make it kind of rational and orderly and all that kind of stuff. So then eventually it comes to a point where he manages to, I think there's like an assassination attempt on the king, and he manages to kind of pin it on the Jesuits. It's like, all right, smoking gun, you're out.
Also, very conveniently, the family involved was a family that had rejected him. Basically, he had courted one of the women of the family and they'd been like, no. And so there's probably some
noble. Get out of here.
Personal satisfaction in there as well.
Mm-hmm. So you can't represent this all in a board game, but it's fun to think. I've not played this, but I can imagine kind of just having all this in my head as I'm, doing the chit movements, the set collecting, all that kind of stuff. I think that's really fun. Yeah. One thing that is thankfully not in this game, I mentioned Goa before, and the older style of Euro was very, like let's spread our influence, right? And let's go into these colonial territories and depict rebuilding in the image. But the older Euros tended to definitely kind of smooth over, quote unquote, the indigenous populations upon which the European settlements are going. So you're colonizing, but there's no representation of the whatever is there before, which is a big problem. It's a huge problem for a lot of games, and there's a lot of different games that I kind of won't play because of that. This game manages to be a build it Euro without touching any of that space at all. And I think it blazes a nice trail in terms of how you can do Euros that are genuine, like, civ building type experiences without opening that can of worms, which is I think is really cool.
Yeah, I agree. Although, I mean, there's definitely colonial activity happening. Part of the crisis for Portugal during this time, they're waiting on money to come from Brazil. There is actually talk during some less sane moments of just moving the royal court over to Brazil because Lisbon was so messed
Of
up.
course. That was
And
wasn't that one of the 5 plans or something? It was like, okay, we could either
yeah,
rebuild this or just abandon it, or
yeah, there's
yeah.
like four main plans, and one is to just relocate to this place where there was already a royal palace, like not too far away, but that was where they summered. So you don't want everyone to move there. It's like, oh, do we rebuild things the way that they were? Do we take this chance to like do some remodeling in the city? And of course, that latter thing is what they choose. But what's really cool that I learned that's not in the game is that because they don't have the internet, like nobody can tweet like, "Oh my god, earthquake!" Like a TikTok video of something falling down or something. You know what I mean? Like, news takes a long time to travel, and so people have no clue just how bad things really are. Some people didn't believe the earthquake story.
Right.
Pombal actually tried to make things sound like they were going better than they were to keep trading partnerships open and make it sound like we're not falling apart over here. We have it completely under control. It's fine. And like that spread of news and how faulty it is this time is really, really fascinating. Like, newspapers actually were not really for the people at all. They're kind of like
Right.
news rags for the aristocracy. And that's interesting. But, Portugal is trying not to lose colonial power. So, like, the Dutch take advantage of this time to, like, take some trading cities that Portugal had, like, along sea routes. And, Portugal's having to make decisions about, they have this longstanding alliance with England at this point against Spain. And so everybody's offering them aid, and Portugal's having to decide who they're going to take money from because, the cheapest way to pay for anything is with money, and then you owe someone a favor. So, there's like a whole lot of complexity beyond, but the game itself is really focused on rebuild the city.
Sure.
There's some shipping, and other than that, it's a very locally focused game, which, I mean, the game is so complicated as it is. I think it's best that way, but it's really fun to think about it in like a richer context.
Yeah, we really hope that we have helped you with our nerd chattedness. We'll come up with some kind of name for this. Maybe just history chat is good enough. Let us know. Let us know in the comments. Liz and I plan on doing more of these, right, Liz?
Yes, absolutely. I'm all about nerd chat.
Let us know what you think about it. Let us know if we're going to keep doing it whether you watch or not. But let us know.
This is my YouTube channel.
If you're interested in seeing, us cover different games, or we have a couple of games on the slate depending on things coming in that we're planning on doing this with. Just every once in a little while. It's not going to be too often, but we absolutely love it. We really hope that we have livened up your play of this particular game. We'd love to hear from you. See if we can get a little bit more context out there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, fellow history nerds, unite. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this and what games you might like to see. So, I have an excuse to play games and read books. Not that I need it.
I have an excuse to not play games if it's a Euro.
But still talk about them.
Absolutely. Although Orleans was a game that I was recommended, or Orleans or whatever, and I have played Orleans a lot.
I dug that one. It was good. But anyway, thank everyone for watching. We really appreciate it, and happy gaming.
Later, everybody.